Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Championship Corner. I have gymnastics legend Chellsie Memmel, and also after reading your book, we'll go super mom too. We'll do that. And especially after my wife and our daughter turns 1 now too. So it's like whole new appreciation, right? Like entirely new appreciation. So I appreciate you taking the time joining us today and just kind of chatting about your philosophy and especially on the athletes like identity side of things and how to like shape like the person that they are. So I appreciate this.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. So first question is, I think it's interesting. I've actually never asked anybody on the show this question, and I think that like you would be a perfect candidate. But in talking with so many of the athletes, I usually have like 3 questions that I lead off with them. And I think one of them, or the first one I usually ask is like, why are you potentially addicted to a life that you don't love? And to give you a little like backstory on that is I usually ask them, I'm like, hey, like, what's the number one emotion you feel day in and day out? And like almost 99% of the time, it's like stress, right? Like that's usually like one of the most common answers. I'm like, okay, like if that's our primary emotion that we're feeling throughout the day, then like why have we become like addicted to that? And so I ask you from either personal experience and obviously coaching experience. So maybe 2 different perspectives on that. It's like, what's your belief in why so many of these athletes continue to just get addicted to what I call unwanted emotion, stress, worry, anxiety, doubt, fear, shame, guilt, and those type of things?
Um, well, I think if you're doing something continuously and that's just what you're feeling, it just becomes your normal.
Right.
And that's unfortunate, and that's what it is. And I know so many people have felt that at some point in their life, or they're feeling it right now. Um, I know I have, just felt that the stress of the grind.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just what it is. And like I said, I feel like it can be your normal, and that's just what you expect. It's what you're ready for, and that's just how it is. And it's hard to sometimes break that cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's definitely like you get in that loop and it
Yeah.
becomes over and over. Was there a moment like for you, I guess going back like from like competitive days of like where you notice like, okay, like, hey, like maybe this isn't what I want to feel every day. Maybe like there's an other side of this of like peace of mind, excitement, joy, fun. Like, was there kind of a shift for you ever?
I'm trying to think like specifically. I will say I know the worst times, like when I was feeling things like that, was when it was an injury. And when I was coming back and I wasn't getting to do what I wanted to do in the gym or do the actual gymnastics. It was the monotony of doing just the exercises
Yeah,
and
yeah,
trying to like get through that part of it. Because for me, that's when it was hard to get excited to go into the gym, when I couldn't do my gymnastics.
yeah.
So for me, like those are the times when that like sticks out the most. But then being able to do the gymnastics is again was like, yes, finally.
Right, right, right. Is there a way that you've utilized that like within like your coaching?
That that one is always tough. And that one for me, like when I explain to my like the kids or whatever, if they're going through something like that, is what is your end goal? Is your end goal still to do gymnastics? What level do you want to get to? What skills do you want to learn? What do you still want to accomplish? Because this right now is not fun, and I'm not
Yeah.
going to pretend that it is. Um, but it's going to get you to where you want to be. And that this is the stepping stone. Each day it's going to get you a little bit better. It's going to get that body part or whatever is happening a little bit stronger, so you can still reach what you want to. Um, but it's acknowledging when something sucks,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
when it is hard, because it is. It's not always pretending that life is sunshines and rainbows.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like so many, I call it like Care Bears, right? Like everybody is like, oh, we should just hug and it should just be lovey dovey every single day. And I feel like I'm curious about, especially since you've been coaching, like what your experience is with this is so many, I say kids, young adults have come to believe that like certain things like stress or fear are just like, it's a blanket statement that those are bad. And I'm like, but that's not true, right? Like, and so it's like trying to educate them on, it's like, it is okay to feel those things and they actually serve you well in certain instances, right? And so like, have you feel like you've had to kind of do the same thing as well?
Yes, there are times it's fun. I am like back in the coaching more because I wasn't as much obviously when I was training. But then doing it more and yes, and saying like it's okay if things aren't going well today. It is okay. I know you have a meet coming up, but one, bad practice isn't going to mean you're going to do poorly at this competition. It is trying to help shift the mindset and reassure an athlete that it is okay to make mistakes because they are going to happen. I mean,
100%.
that's athletes, that's sports, that's life. You're not going to have a perfect day every single day. That is just completely unrealistic to have that in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you have kids too, right?
Yes, they're big kids throw a whole new thing into the mix. And it is so fun, but more often than not, the days can go a little bit differently than you thought they were going to go, and it's okay.
Yeah, and I think you learn to like this sounds so like I guess like cliche, but like you learn to appreciate so many other things in a different way. Like when a new one comes along or you begin like I say a new journey. That's definitely in a journey in and of itself. So, yeah, it's very interesting. Okay, so actually one of the most powerful, it's actually in your final thoughts. It's one of your statements where you said, uh, it is okay to rely on other people because you make each other stronger. Um, how important I think now and previously is like we're mentors and I call them like your own like masterminds, right? It can be your own friends, but like I've come to learn over the last probably 5 or 6 years that like that is kind of if there is a magic bullet, that's kind of the magic bullet is to surround yourself like with people that just see the world differently. They see that they can shed a new light on you. Um, how's that like impacted both like in your competitive career, obviously your coaching career, and then obviously educating? Because I feel like that's one of the hardest things to get them to understand. Like, yeah, cool, mentors. Yeah, we get it.
Um, I guess I knew I had obviously good people in my corner, especially like with my parents throughout my entire career and my life, and they're still have huge impacts on me. But I appreciated it the most, for my comeback this time around because there were so many moving parts to it. And it would not have happened without that core group of people surrounding me. And I know that, and I acknowledge that like 100%. Like it would not have happened, first and foremost without my husband's support. Like he helped me get through some of the very hard days when I was questioning myself, knowing that I was crazy for doing it, but he was always in my corner supporting me. And encouraging me to do it because he knew that I wanted to and knew that it was this challenge that I wanted to see, what I could do with it. So to have that kind of support with him and then also my kids, being an active part of it was huge and amazing. And I don't know, that part for me was like I said, that was just huge. And then having obviously my mom and my dad being my primary coach, just like I said, it would not have happened without them. And then also my sisters being right there in the front to support me, and be in the gym with me. And again, seeing the struggle, or if I was freaking out one of the days because she signed me up to compete, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But like I said, I know that wouldn't have happened without those people, and there's more. But it is trying to get through to somebody that it's easier to do things when you have good people behind you.
Yeah. Yeah. I find again, like that's one of the most fascinating things, whether it's a like early teen, 12, 13, 14, up to like I consider young adult, 20, 21, 22 is like, if I can give you, say I'm 34, I'm like, if I can give you 15 years of like you'll be so far ahead of me in 15 years if you take this like one piece of advice, and it's like finding those people that are, I call it like just playing the game at a higher level than you, whatever it is, whether it's being a parent, whether it's being a coach, whether it's actually being an athlete, is you just, I think Tony Robbins said this like superbly, like proximity is power, right? Like when you get around those people, vice versa too, right? Like it becomes very scary if you find yourself in an environment that does not support what it is that you want to. I guess that kind of leads into getting people, kids, athletes, to understand the power of saying no, right? Like I think that that's one of the biggest challenges is people want to say yes to everything. People are very, they want to please everybody, especially one of my mentors told me, it's like, we've become to believe that like every relationship is meant to last forever. And she was like, if you think about it, like most of your friends have changed like roughly every 3 to 5 years, right? Like you graduated elementary school and then middle school. And it's like, there's this constant evolution of like your friends along the way. So is that like something that you try to instill with them too? Is not just saying yes to everything, but there are moments in time of like, maybe this person, maybe this opportunity, maybe this thing doesn't serve you well, and it is okay to say no. It is okay to walk away from things.
Well, I'm still working on that myself.
Aren't we all? Aren't
So
we all?
I'm gonna lead with that. I'm not gonna say that is something I'm preaching 1000% when it is something I am still working on. But it is also just trying to give some, I guess accountability is what I'm putting in my head, the word, but like when you're asking them about like that turn or how did that feel or what do you think you need, I think it's just trying to give them some ownership too,
Mm,
of saying what do you think you need? Like I love that. I love asking that. If we're done with an assignment or we have some time left, or how did that one feel to you, so they can actually give me the feedback, and stop and think about it instead of just me saying, well, there was this and this, that's what I saw. I like to hear what they felt first.
yeah, yeah. And I forget, there's a story behind it, a parable, whatever it is, and this is kind of the second question I usually ask people is, do you find yourself like suffering in comfort? And what I mean by that is there's a lot of very well-intended people in your life that actually do good things for you, but hold you back from whatever that ultimate experience, that ultimate dream is. And so my challenge to them is always like, I always tell them too, it's like, I'm not going to give you anything new. Everything you have is already inside of you. Is I feel like my superpower and yours is to find people that just hold the keys, right? Like just help you unlock the doors that you already have, these talents, skills, and just uniquenesses and brilliancies about yourself, um, to just uncover and learn. And so I feel like that is one of the most powerful things, like you said, is like giving them a voice to be like, oh, like, yeah, okay, I did feel that inside. Oh man, there is a piece of me inside of that. So I feel like that's super unique, super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I know I'm lucky as
Why
far as parents being that's what they were for me. They were able to, push enough, be supportive enough, know when to step back, and just always be there. They were very good guiding at guiding me through, my career, when they were my coaches, when they weren't my coaches, when they were again. So it was.
How did they know? This is good. How did they know? Because there's so many parents, and in being I had a sports performance gym for a decade, is I had multiple conversations, actually a lot of conversations with parents of like, just be mom, just be dad, right? Like they just want you. So like, how did your parents, how were they able to juggle that of like, this is when I'm coach and I'm wearing this hat and this is when I'm dad, and like You're just my daughter. I love you.
Yeah. It was, I mean, we did set the boundaries. And it is, you still, you set the boundaries, but you have to respect them, which we both did. I mean, because you can't just say this is what it's going to be and then just not do it.
All yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we set the boundaries of the gym is the gym and home is home. And if you want to talk about the gym at home, we have to ask first and then respect what one of us says. If we say yeah, sure, then great. If we say no, then respect it. And no, I don't want to talk about it until we get to the gym tomorrow. Okay, great. So that part of it, just like I said, having the boundaries and respecting the boundaries made a big difference.
Yeah.
And that I think you need that and just need to be supportive. And there was times too, obviously, when the times are, tough in the gym or this or that, or was a fear of this. And it's like, oh, I don't know if I can do this or I want to be done. My mom's like, great, you can be done. That's just fine. You got to learn that skill first. And then you can tell me again if you want to be done.
Yeah. Did he have a fear of going into it because of that like boundary of coach and parent?
I think there was some hesitation, but I was the one who asked my dad. It wasn't like they sat me down and were like, well, I think we're just going to try to coach you. So that was it. It came from me, and it came from me after I had already done an Olympic, a trials and all of that. So I had been through the process. I knew, obviously, I was still young. I was still 16, but coming from me made a difference. And he's like, we'll start it on a week to week basis and just see how it goes. It wasn't like it was going to be yes. I mean, obviously he jumped in with 2 feet and didn't give his full effort, but he's like, but let's see how it goes first.
Yeah. What's what's your next challenge?
My next challenge.
Yeah, what's next?
Well,
I asked too because in your book it was like essentially it was like just tell me what I can't do, right? Like just tell me what I can't do and I'm going head first off the high dive into the deep end. So like I feel like people are pressing your buttons about something. I don't know, right? Like
well, obviously I love any kind of physical challenge and stuff in the gym like that. Just I find it fun.
yeah.
And for me too, I think it's a lot easier to do the daily grind of working out when you are working towards something. But also just my biggest like working challenge is the new role with USA Gymnastics. Like I'm just about in June, it'll be a year. So that is ever, it is ever changing, and I want to do my best to have a positive impact on the team, on the sport. And that to me, it's been like the most like nerve-wracking position to take. And it wasn't one that I took lightly.
Yeah.
So that for me is a huge challenge.
Was it because you felt like you had like a lot of responsibility?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is a huge responsibility. So yeah, so that for me is really the biggest challenge at the moment. And also parenting. That's a challenge in itself. And that is one I feel like you're constantly questioning yourself. I know I do. And then there'll be some nuggets and times where you're like, all right, I'm doing something right. And then other times you're like, oh my gosh, I hope I didn't just screw my kid up.
100%. It's funny. Actually, I was talking with my mom like just this last week, and she was like, Ryan, like, just remember, like, it's not a science, it's an art, right? Like, so like you don't feel like you have to like read every thing and like parent your kid this way. It's like if it works for your kid, it works for your kid, right? So I'm like hardwiring that in my head for now. In any aspect, I guess we can go gymnastics or just personal life, parenting, anything. It's like, what do you consider yourself brilliant at?
Well, I know I'm good at gymnastics.
Well, I ask too because it's again, it's one of those questions is like I believe that like we all have like our own superpowers. We all have like our own uniquenesses. We all have our own brilliance. Um Most people don't want to admit them. They kind of like know intuitively, like, I'm really good at that. So I'm always just curious, like what do you see like yourself like brilliant at? And especially maybe you could tie it into because I would assume that probably weighed into your decision within your new role within USA Gymnastics is like, hey, I have a uniqueness, I have a superpower of X, and I feel like if I step into this role, I can really empower, I could really impact the athletes around me, the coaches around me, just the organization as a whole. And so I'm sure that that kind of weighed in. So I'm just kind of curious of, what you see as your own brilliance.
I mean, I know I have coming into this role, I do have a unique like perspective of just I have a long career. I've been through a lot of ups and downs in that career. I've trained at a lot of different, obviously, points in my life. I've trained when I was young, went through an Olympic cycle at 16 and then at 20 and tried again at 24. And then I trained again after a long break and having a family with a completely different style of training. So I do have I have a very different perspective that way to see, like what worked for me in the
Mhm.
training, what was different from when I was an adult versus a kid, and just how a mindset shift about certain things made, like, I feel like all the difference in my training and allowed me to do it as an adult. Um, I actually thought it was funny because I was thinking about that on the way here of just the whole mindset. I can't even say the dang word mindset shift because it's whatever. In especially about just like the physical preparation and conditioning and like the taking care of your body after training, and how I approached all of that was so different from when I was a kid. And it wasn't that I was doing a ton of conditioning differently. It was how I thought about it.
Mhm.
And it was the reason behind why I was doing it. I wasn't doing it because someone told me to do it.
Yeah.
I was doing it because I was choosing to do it and doing it with a purpose. And I feel like that made such a difference. And I did do things a little bit differently, but it just, I'm not one to go back and say, well, what if I did this or what if I did that? But if I do wonder sometimes, what if my mindset was different about that kind of preparation when I was younger?
Okay. What would be one of the biggest shifts potentially that you would have made between like the way that you prepared, the way that I kind of view it as like the way that you saw the world, right? Like it was the way that like you processed information and kind of your own beliefs on training. What would have been maybe one or two of those potential shifts that you kind of would have shifted?
Just again, the approach to conditioning and to the physical preparation, that would have been the shift of trying to get excited about that. Cause like now I come to the gym and I look forward to doing the conditioning and doing that grind. And before, like, I just did it because I knew I had to do it.
Hmm.
And a lot of times with that, you just go through the motions. And I am a huge believer, especially now because I've seen it work, going through the motions versus doing the movement with purpose is so different. It is
Yeah.
so different. And I know fully, like 100%, I know I would not have been able to do what I did if I didn't do that preparation of the physicalness behind it. So like taking the conditioning seriously, taking my body seriously, taking the recovery seriously, allowed me to do gymnastics. It allowed me to do a Yurchenko double when I was over 30. And that was a skill that scared me. And that was so hard for me when I was in my peak shape, when I was 18. So, like I said, that just that is huge. Like to know that physical preparation and taking it seriously, a shift in mindset of just like believing in yourself and knowing you can do it
Yeah.
is so powerful.
How much of a, how do I ask this? How much of an importance do you try to, because you've talked about like mindset and like your shift and your beliefs and your perceptions of like, do you preach that to, I guess, your kids in the gym, and then part of like USA Gymnastics within their team, of the importance of the emotional awareness about everything? Because I feel like, especially when you get to that level, a lot of people just think that like more hours means I'm going to get better, right? Like it's like this blanket statement of like, as long as I do more hours, then I'll get better. And I think that's just in sports across the board. And it's like, A, there has to be purpose, right? And then there has to be some kind of like emotional awareness of like, am I taking care of myself? Am I like seeing, is this actually helping me, or is this hurting me? And like kind of the whole like analyzing like what it is that you're actually doing. How much of that is your approach, your conversations with them, etc.?
That is something we are getting into. And that it's kind of it's tough to bring that aspect into it, but it is one that we're, trying to do. Yeah, because it's just like I said, I know it worked for me. I know it made all the difference in what I was doing and it allowed me to do what I did. So to be able to, yes, kind of shift our focus a little bit that way. And no, definitely more hours doesn't mean you're going to get better. More hours of doing what?
Yeah.
More hours of doing what? I know that if you go up and do a skill and nail it solidly 3 times, that is far better than doing 10 just okay ones where you're going through the motions.
100%. 100% is, especially the younger kids. I always ask them, I'm like, have you ever sat down and started reading a book, and after like 3 pages, you have no idea what you read? They're like, oh my God. Yeah. I'm like, kind of like that, right? Like just because you have the book open and you're going through it does not mean you're retaining any of that information.
Doesn't at all. No, that was again one of the biggest things was quality over quantity. Like I knew I could only do 5 of certain things. And I'm like, all right, I have only 5. I'm going to make these count. Or the days I only could do 3. I'm like, I can only handle doing 3 today. I'm going to make them the 3 of the best ones. And I go up with the intention that they're going to be great. Now they were always no, but my intention was to get up and make this skill the best that I could at that time.
Yeah. And as the level, I guess, of the athlete, is there more autonomy? Do you find that in terms of like them kind of making decisions? Because I feel like in my experience is like the higher the level of achiever, the better they are at like coaching themselves, right? It's like you almost need the real coach like less and less and less, because then they just kind of learn. They're like, hey, like this is like you just said, like I knew what worked for me.
Yeah, yes. No, yes, and you should. And they do, yes. Generally at once you get to that highest level, they an athlete knows, like they know when it was off, they know a lot of the times why. And a coach is a guide.
Yeah. That's exactly that's the exact word that I use. Is I'm like, see it as like a tour guide or an academic advisor, right? Like you come to college per se and you're like, hey, I want to major in economics. They're like, great, you need 3 sciences. Here's a list of 15, you choose, right? It's like they're just kind of like your guide along the way. And like you make these decisions based off of like what you guys are working on together. Um, okay, last of the 3 questions is kind of going back to identity a little bit, because for me, that I just believe, and being around just sports in general over the last like 12, 13 years in coaching, is if you shift or what I call like upgrade slash transform the person, then the athlete kind of just gets shifted and transformed in and of itself. Versus I think a lot of people try to come in and they're like, they just try to shift the athlete. An athlete comes in and is like, I want to perform better. I'm like, okay, what are you thinking about? And da, 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 right. And it just becomes all about the athlete. And then 10 years down the road, they're like, oh shit, what do I do now? Right. Like, this is the only identity that I ever had. And so I call it like a gap in terms of, I'm curious to get your perspective and maybe how like you go about this, especially with younger athletes, of there's a gap in terms of who they present to the world and who they really are inside of them. And it's being able to, I think, like close that gap of just showing the world who you truly are. And I think that is when our brilliances, our uniquenesses, our superpowers, and everything gets unleashed. Otherwise, we're just being somebody that we're not, right? We're wearing the clothes that it's not us, right? So I'm curious, are those conversations that you have, obviously in your own gym, and then obviously at the highest level as well, and helping them understand of, because I feel like the more they live who they truly are, it just betters their performance overall because it just gives them freedom. It just gives them a relaxed state. So just curious your perspective.
Yes. And I mean, I'm still newer with one of the groups that I'm working with, but it is trying to get to know them as a person and not just an athlete. And I think that can be difficult when you're in the gym for the purpose of helping them be a better gymnast and reach goals in the gym. But, by asking them questions or doing things like that, or even I feel like sometimes too, watching them in line when they're chatting with their friends, I'm like, that's more who you are. And I was like, and I do say that a lot to them. I was like, I want to see that person when you're out on the floor doing your floor routine. I want to see that attitude because that looks like a really awesome person. And on the floor, you look a little scared.
Yeah.
So it's finding trying to get through to them and what works for them, or even like just as simple as a floor routine, finding the music that speaks to them and what they're comfortable with and what they're willing to, to perform.
Yeah. And I'd say it was kind of by accident of like the biggest kind of icebreaker, because as I would come in and talk to and like work with like any of the teams or athletes, is I know in their mind, it's like, oh shit, here's this guy again. Right. And so it's like, how do I relate? And so this became my question of, I just started walking around and be like, what'd you eat for dinner last night? Right. Like it just like this random icebreaker to like get them shifted in mind. Like, what did I have? So just kind of like this small conversation starter about something totally meaningless, right? Just to ease the tension of like, hey, like let's make this fun. Okay, so last question. You can go broad or you can kind of put it in buckets in terms of like age range, maybe what certain athletes are after, but like what would be like your biggest piece of advice to honestly parents or athletes in terms of getting, I just call it from going from point A to point B, whatever that is, right? They're at a point right now and they desire something and there's a gap, right? Whether it be whether it be the greatest level 8 in their entire life, right? Like whatever that is what would be kind of your biggest piece of advice for them?
I'm a planner, and that's like what worked for me was having that ultimate goal. I mean, I'm just going to go back to my career of gymnastics, having the ultimate goal of reaching the Olympic Games, making an Olympic team. That was my ultimate goal. And then we just worked backward from that. We made the smaller goals, smaller stepping stones of what is going to help me get there. okay, if you want to go to the Olympics, you're probably going to have to make a couple world championship teams and do this or do this. And how do you make the world championship team? You're going to have to get international assignments first. And it's putting, the routines together. What are the skills and the routines and the start values that are going to get you there? And just always continuing to work backwards. So it's, and for me, it was always having like a big list. It wasn't just, I want to make the Olympic Games.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
You got to have a plan to get there. And there are so many pieces that will get you to that point. So it's always having that ultimate goal, but then making the small ones and ones to get there and to celebrate like the little stepping stones. Like learn this skill. That's amazing. You did this. You were able to put it in the routine. That's awesome. So just celebrating the small victories along the way, but it's just having a plan. So like I said, I am a planner and I worked so much better when I came in. My dad would always have a training plan and we would always talk about it and say, is this going to work today or whatever? But it was always, leading up to something. So I knew what to expect and it felt more manageable that way. Instead of, like I said, I want to go to the Olympics. Well, that seems crazy.
Yeah.
How are you going to make it manageable and sound like it is a possibility? How are you going to break it down?
How did you, because you talked about this in your book a little bit too, is how did you manage, because as we all know is our plan ends up kind of going left, right, up, down, circle, circle, circle.
Yeah,
How are you able to, did you just kind of have that frame going in? It's like, okay, this isn't going to be perfect. And when the
absolutely.
hiccups come along the way, it's like, we'll make adjustments at that point. Is that kind of how you went about it?
Yep, it is. Yes. It was knowing that and having learned that throughout my career and having my parents there to help me through those tough times. There's always going to be something. Yes. It's never going to go from point A to B to C in a straight line. That's just not going to happen. There's going to be bumps, U-turns, pivots. And those are the times you reset and refocus. Be like, okay, this happened. What do I need to shift in my plan to, make it work again?
Mm-hmm.
It might take a little longer. That's okay. My first round at the Olympics didn't work. I got hurt earlier in that year and I made alternate. That wasn't in the plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't in the plan. It wasn't in the plan to, hurt my shoulder and, need surgery at World Championships in 2006 and not compete most of 2007. That was not my plan, but that's what happened. And I just had to, like I said, reshift and refocus and figure it out.
I love it. I love it. Actually, true last question. What do you find most joyful in life now?
I love being home with my kids and my family. That to me is great. And if I get even more, I love when we can be outside
Mm-hmm.
and be outside together and play or walk or doing whatever. But that to me is amazing. And then of course, I mean, I still find so much joy in being in the gym.
Yeah. 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 Well, it's too, is I listened to somebody this the other day, is there's this notion of like work-life balance and you got to have blah, blah, blah. And this individual went on, is like, well, like, what if I just like to work, right? Like, what if I find joy in working? Kind of like you. It's like, what if I find joy in the gym? Like, it's okay for me to be in the gym if I find joy at being in the gym.
I do. I'm excited. If it was, there's not usually a day where I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go there again. I mean, we all have our hard days, obviously, where you're going to be ups and downs or whatever. But I genuinely enjoy going into the gym, whether it is to coach or to just work out myself.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, again, I appreciate you jumping on, chatting with us today. As always, kind of the whole mission of this podcast is, as with anything, whether it's reading a book, whether it's listening to something like this or on YouTube or anything, is not to try to ingest everything, but just find the one nugget, right? Like find the one thing that applies to you and that you can actually like implement into your life today or start working on or dive deeper into, learning about more, whatever the case may be. That's ultimately like our mission within the podcast. So again, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And for all you guys listening, hopefully you found your golden nugget and can go out and uncover your brilliance, your superpowers, and your uniquenesses. Till then, love you guys. Talk with you soon.